Welcome to This Lawyer's Life, a podcast of the New York City Bar Association. Today we meet Rudhir Krishtel, the CEO and executive coach whose consultancy focuses on leadership that prioritizes growth, well-being, and DEI. If you've ever wrestled with the complex business of cultivating a healthy, productive, committed culture on your team, Rudhir has some ideas for you.
We get to choose the culture that we want to create on our teams, and we want to create it in a way that's meaningful, that matters, but it's also flexible enough that it meets the demand and the needs of the people that you want as a part of that community.
Rudhir's practice places an emphasis on emotional intelligence and often overlooked principles that matter so deeply both to well-being and productivity.
That's where the emotional intelligence begins, is actually just understanding ourselves as we experience difficulty. What happens to us? How does it affect how we respond? How does it affect how we react? How does it change how we engage in a situation?
There is no one-size-fits-all. So Greg and Rudhir also unpacked the growing conversation around neurodivergence.
Learning about individuals and how they work differently and how they're motivated differently and how they achieve differently is a leadership requirement.
Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar. Here's your host, Gregory Binstock.
Welcome to This Lawyer's Life, a professional development podcast where we talk with lawyers about seizing opportunities, learning lessons the hard way, and about what makes them tick. I'm Gregory Binstock, Director of Professional Development here at the New York City Bar Association, and today I have the pleasure to chat with Rudhir Krishtel. Rudhir Krishtel, you're an executive and career coach with your own consultancy. And before that, you spent 15 years in patent law, most notably as Senior Patent Counsel for Apple. Your many keynote speaking engagements include the City Bar's own professional development workshop series, which is how you and I first met. And now you're here with us on the podcast. Welcome, Rudhir. We are so glad to have you join us. Thanks for being here.
Greg, thank you so much for having me.
So glad to have you. So just to start off, give us an idea of what your day was like yesterday, or if that's too easy, walk us through the most demanding day you've had in the last month so we get a sense of what your day-to-day is like.
I'm lucky because I created my business. I also created the perfect schedule for me. At the end of every day, I get to say this day was amazing. One of our company values is live in your superpower. And my superpower is speaking and coaching. On a typical day, a hard day or an amazing day, I may speak once or twice to companies, law firms, large groups of individuals, the New York City Bar, and I may be coaching a few individuals. I spend some of my time speaking, some of my time coaching, and the other time with my amazing team. And that's typically how I split my day and my week. And again, it makes for an amazing way to spend my time.
And about how much of each do you try to ideally schedule in terms of the group stuff, the one-on-one coaching, and just what it takes to maintain your own business?
I'd say it's a third across the week. And living in my superpower, every one of those things actually gives me energy. It's a contrast to moments when I was practicing where I wasn't able to dictate my time and my schedule. And on some calls, maybe on discovery calls or negotiating a deal across the table where it was an energy drain. And then some aspects of team building and preparing for trial were an energy gain. And so it's lucky to now be in a position where I'm first able to make sure most of the things that I spend my time on give me energy, but then also build a team where the people on the team also are in a position of doing work that gives them energy.
So on a related note, your LinkedIn bio leads with the moniker Joyful Optimist. And I can already get a sense of that from the way we're speaking. How does that apply to your outlook as an approach when you're coaching lawyers in the industry?
Optimism helps so much, especially when things are challenging. I'm able to paint a really hopeful picture of where people are able to take their practice in their life. And then I'm in the lucky position of working with people to get to that position. It's an amazing place to be. And one of the things that I love is the amount of faith that I have in my clients. What's great about lawyers and people in the legal industry is that these are high-performing individuals. More often than not, when a lawyer puts their mind to something, it tends to happen. Resolving a client issue, advising on a matter, offering counseling. When someone comes to us with a challenge, we often resolve that issue for people. When you turn that attention and that level of engagement on your own life, career, and growth, I also see a lot of success. I see people setting this amazing vision with joyful optimism, and then us over time moving people to where they want to take their practice and their life.
And how is it typically that an individual ends up seeing you? It's almost like seeing a doctor or a therapist. Do they have to be convinced that something is wrong? Do they see you on a bad day or on their best day because they want to move forward and they are sort of high motivated individuals that want to train that energy somewhere, or do you see sort of a mix?
It's a mix of all of these things. People want something that's slightly different than what's happening right now. That's when they come to see us. They're either in a challenging position that they want to get better, or they see that down the road, I see myself with a larger book of business. I see myself in a broader, more impactful role. I see myself leading an organization or a team. They come to us with this challenge. So long as where they want to go is better than where they are right now, we're in for it. And so we're here to help people move to a better positioning, whether it's addressing a complexity that they're facing or just improving their practice, improving their leadership, improving how they handle certain situations. We're here for that personal and professional growth.
We talk with lawyers from all different backgrounds and doing all sorts of things on this podcast. Sometimes we have the pleasure to speak with people that work in professional development proper, like you. So I want to take that opportunity to engage with you and pepper you with some questions on sort of key issues and hot topics and get your take to see, are they things that you focus on? Are they things that you advise on, and hear what your thoughts are? So first, I want to turn to some issues that I've been hearing around Gen Z in the workplace, and specifically with some issues around communication skills regarding the intergenerational play between folks who are traditionally now in the partnership and management position and the younger workforce. You can take that anywhere you like, but as an introduction to that, specifically, I'm hearing concerns with a lot of folks around the mandate for being in the office. Obviously, firms are struggling to understand what the best way to promote that is. I hear things like partners and leadership want attorneys to be in the office, and they are, quote unquote, asking people to be in 3 times a day. So there's that. The Gen Z folks want to understand clearly what the expectation is. So they may hear a suggestion of 3 days as one thing, whereas management actually means that's a mandate. So you might end up with a scenario where you have a Gen Z attorney who is, for example, in the office, and they're literally on a Zoom meeting that's taking place down the hall. And folks are scratching their heads. And the Gen Z attorney is thinking, well, I'm answering emails at the same time, and I'm in the Zoom meeting, and I'm in the office. I'm doing all the things you asked. And you might understand the perspective of the managing partner is, I'm in the office. I mandated you to be in the office. I'm conducting this meeting down the hall. Why aren't you here? How could you be down the hall when I'm here in the conference room? So I'm hearing a lot of things like that. I wanted to know, are you hearing things like that? And how do you advise to bridge that gap between this understanding between those generational divides?
We certainly work with leaders and teams on these challenges. And I'm hearing 2 things, Greg: communication and behavior. There's a gap in communication, and there's a gap in behavior or behavior change. Behavior change, and we start with the second. Behavior change is one of, or if not the hardest thing, like one of the most, or if not the hardest thing. The amount of the time, energy, and money we spend on accountability, it's why we have a Peloton. We have group, we pay money, and then finally we may get on that bike to exercise. And so we do a lot for behavior change, to change our habits. In earlier generations, we got used to working in a certain way. In more recent generations, especially based on what was baked in during the pandemic, we also got used to doing work in a certain way and living a certain way. And those 2 behaviors are in conflict. This is where communication comes in. making sure we're on the same page, both about expectations and outcomes. If there's a lack of clarity in communication, a lack of clarity in expectation, we want to be really clear as at the outset. And sometimes our clarity has to be repeated a few times before we get what we want. And so communication or marketing, if you want to call it that, getting the message out, getting it out repeatedly so that people are clear on what the expectation is matters. The other thing that matters in this behavioral shift is relationships. Relationships are critical. And we want to make sure that everybody knows that connection matters, breaking bread matters, time and presence with people matters. Time and presence with people in person matters. I know that I have built incredible relationships over the pandemic with people virtually. And yet I know how that can be distinct with people that I've shared meals with, had open time with in an office without an agenda, the time before and after a meeting. And those relationships matter a lot. We're in a service business and in a service industry. Two things are critical: the quality of the work and the quality of your relationships. We want to do incredible work, but we can't do it without amazing relationships. They're necessary to bring in the work, maintain the work, and do amazing work on teams. So there needs to be a meeting of the minds. And in part, we definitely need to spend some time together in person at some point in the course of our relationships. And yet, Greg, you and I are close. We have a professional relationship. We spend a lot of time together. We've never met in person. And so we can also prove up the fact that two people can work together for years and not have met. It's a complex and a challenging thing. This is where we get to choose the company we want to be with. We get to choose the culture that we want to create on our teams. And we want to create it in a way that's meaningful, that matters, but it's also flexible enough that it meets the demand and the needs of the people that you want as a part of that community. So we want to be on the same page about what we're asking for. We want to be on the same page about making sure we meet everybody's needs. And we want to continue to find ways to get to a space and a place where we're able to work on teams, both virtually and remotely and in person, but also create a culture where people are actually connected, where there's real meaning for relationship, and we're able to go through these experiences in order to provide incredible services.
And you're touching on a sort of the next point I wanted to ask you about, which is on the matter of networking and small talk. What are younger lawyers missing, if anything, from that in-office experience? And how are older and younger lawyers thinking about it differently? Is it the same skill set that we knew before the pandemic, or has it transformed in a digital way that some folks just aren't seeing, but it does still exist offline or online, I guess I should say?
Relationships are different. They evolve, and they certainly evolve with the use of technology. I might have a stronger relationship or a different relationship with my cousins in India because of WhatsApp and how much we communicate than my parents did with their family when they were writing letters by snail mail. But we could battle about who was closer and who knew each other better. I just don't know. And so we leverage technology to enhance relationships. I met people over the pandemic through social media and LinkedIn, where when we got on a call for the first time, we acted like old friends. And I had to remind people that I met that we had never met in person, acting like fast friends, close friends. And yet we'd only met through social media. So I'm really bullish on what's possible through chat messages and through social and through video calls. And yet I still feel like nothing replaces an in-person gathering, breaking bread, rubbing elbows, being in an office together, and that time before and after a call. It's where mentorship happens. It's where lessons are learned. It's where people get comfortable with what's uncomfortable. Some of the most meaningful times I've ever had in the practice of law are 2 a.m. with my colleagues around me in advance of trial, cracking jokes, preparing exhibits, getting ready for the next day. It's irreplaceable. And yet I've won entire matters and cases with an entirely virtual team of people that never met each other. So I think there's a lot possible. Again, it goes to the practice that you want to create, the types of relationships you want to have. I tend to think as we are sourcing work, getting work from people and working together with each other, some healthy combination of having meaningful dialogue virtually, but connecting in person really matters. And networking through both of these means and being really good at both can go a really long way.
On the topic of neurodiversity and neurodivergence, in attorneys. This is something I'm hearing a lot of professional development offices think more about. How would you approach a supervisor who comes to you and says, my understanding is that I have multiple employees on my team that are in different places on the spectrum, but I don't know exactly what that means or how I'm supposed to change my managerial style? Or a partner who is less understanding and they say, this sounds to me like younger lawyers that just don't want to do work or that just blow past deadlines or don't ask the right questions. How do you, again, in thinking about bridging that gap or managing up and down, if you will, on the subject of neurodiversity, are you seeing that more in your work? And how do you begin to approach that topic in your, what I know is a thorough DEI lens in how you approach things?
First, I want to decouple neurodivergence from age or generation. I know very senior lawyers that are extremely successful that are self-defined, neurodivergent. They self-identify as neurodivergent, extremely successful, highly achieving, and also think differently than others might. And so some of it might be chalked up as generational, but a large part is really just our understanding of neurodiversity or neurodivergence. And it's a topic and structure and frameworks and people's way of being that we really want to understand better and become more intimately aware of in order to improve our workplaces and how we connect and work with each other on teams. Everybody listening has a neurodivergent team member. Some companies have higher percentages than others. Some sectors have higher percentages than others. You have colleagues that are neurodivergent. You have clients who are neurodivergent, and your clients have customers and people that they serve that are neurodivergent. And so our understanding of people who are, again, differently wired or on the spectrum, however you want to identify it, is extremely valuable. It's critical to understanding how we can improve work, how we can improve life for all of the people around us. Learning about individuals and how they work differently and how they're motivated differently and how they achieve differently is a leadership requirement. We are leading because we are leading people. People are different. We need to understand how different people function. Some people are motivated by some aspects of life. Some people are motivated by others. Some succeed in certain structures. Others succeed in others. As leaders of organizations and teams, for anyone here who is a leader, which I feel like almost everybody listening is, and or leading an organization, our ability to understand different people and how they function and how they succeed and how they thrive is imperative. And so our deeper understanding of neurodivergence, I think, is just going to go a really long way for all of us.
I appreciate you reframing that question. I'm seeing your point there, and that's really helpful a way of thinking about it.
What's helpful about the reframe? What's helpful to you, Greg?
Well, what's helpful is that I embedded in that question a generational aspect, which is maybe, part of the hotter topic, but loses sight of the fact that neurodivergence is not new. It's just being talked about in this way a little bit more, but it's almost making me think like there's always been gay lawyers. They just haven't been out in the same way. There's always been neurodivergent lawyers. It's just that we're understanding now that they're on our team and that, like you said, that we're all working with those folks and that it's not necessarily a generational thing. It's not a new thing.
I have a friend who's retiring, has ADHD, is retiring, had an incredibly successful career. I have several clients whose books of business we've grown. Some are on the spectrum, others have ADHD. And I certainly know that people in this practice are figuring out how to establish themselves. And I have faith in all of them because the uniqueness in their experience will allow them to understand themselves, understand others, ultimately understand clients and customers. That deeper understanding is really valuable. And as I mentioned, there are some companies who have a high percentage of team members who are neurodivergent. They're ahead of the curve. They're learning how to teach leadership, how to teach team building, how to teach productivity, how to make sure that everybody is on the same page, even though people approach problems differently. They're going to be ahead of the curve. And so the more that we open our mind to these differences and understand how different people work differently, the better off we're going to be down the road.
The New York City Bar Association is a dynamic community of over 23,000 legal practitioners. Members shape the future of the legal profession, serve the public, and gain an edge in their careers. To learn more about becoming a member of the City Bar or to join today, visit nycbar.org/join. Save 20% on semi-annual dues when you join. Call Customer Relations at 212-382-6663 and use code POD24.
Shifting gears for a minute, something that I know firms like to consider, but it's tough to ask people at your own firm about this for what I assume will be obvious reasons, but talking about career change management, the polite way of saying you want a new job or you have a new job. And I assume you must get this all the time, right? People are seeking your advice on they're not happy where they are and they want to change jobs. But looking at specific tips and strategies, let's say I come to you and I say, Rudhir, I've secured my new job. I want to give them a month notice and I want to understand what I should really be thinking about to leave elegantly and gracefully. How do you help me do that?
A few things come to mind.
Yeah.
You're not the first person to leave a job. Most people around us are grown up. Communication matters and relationships matter. So we keep those four things in mind. I think it gives you a valuable formal or even informal playbook on how you might approach this challenge. You want to realize that this organization has been through transition before. It lived before you. It'll live after you, by and large, unless you started the company. And so giving folks a heads up goes a really long way. Communicating and letting them know that there's a transition or a change happening that is positive for you and you want to make it positive for them, that you're here to help on your way out. All of that, I think, goes a really long way. When I left my job at the firm, I was very nervous about leaving. I had been there for 10 years. I felt obligated or like I owed something. And I was very nervous about even talking to people about the idea that I wanted to leave. And I thought maybe they would write me off. I let 2 or 3 partners know. And as much as they loved all of us working together, they were very much championing me and taking my career to the next stage. And so they were happy to give me advice and insight on how to decide between positions. They were happy to give me insight on how to handle interviews. It was actually much more positive than I realized. And afterwards, they were colleagues that I worked with in different contexts. I was at the client, they were at a company, and there were different ways that we had established our relationship. In fact, even when I started this business, they were some of the first people I called, and they were hugely insightful and valuable. So investing in the relationship is critical. When you're clear, when you're transparent, people in relationships don't like you hiding things from them. So when you're open with people, you invest in the relationship, you're upfront, and you're helpful. On the way out, I'd love to help. I want to make sure that y'all are set up. Here's how I'm going to finish this work. Here's how I'm going to help you transition. And here's the few things and checklists I've created so that the next person taking this on is ready for success. If you're surrounded by a bunch of grownups, which I hope you are, they'll be able to handle it. They're fine. They've been through difficulty before. They'll be through it again. And so long as you're being helpful and clear and transparent along the way, I think by and large, you'll set both of you up for success.
In the realm of business development, let's say you have a new client and they say, I've been a great worker bee at my firm, and that's the role that I've been in. And my firm is now telling me, you've been a great worker bee. We love your hours and all that's great. And now you need a book of business. And they say, I feel that I have no frame of reference for what to do with that kind of advice and pathway. And they say, oh, great, we'll hire Rudhir and he's going to coach you on how to do that. What does a 9-month plan begin to look like? I'm not going to ask you to give away all your secrets, but I mean, what are the basics of what business development looks and feels like when somebody comes to you and says, I don't even know what that looks like for me?
I'm laughing right now because the way that you frame it, it reminds me of being an immigrant, a son of immigrants from India and being raised in this country. Your entire early life, your parents tell you, for anyone that relates, hey, don't date, just focus on your homework, focus on your studies, pay attention to school, pay attention to grad school. And then all of a sudden, by the time you're 25, they say, now get married. It's like,
Right.
well, wait, I can't. you told me not to date for 10 years and now I'm supposed to get married. And it reminds me of law firm life when you're supposed to just put your head down, get the hours done. You make partner, or you're on the partner track. All of a sudden you look up and they're like, here, now grow a business. And so anyway, it just cracks me up. I'm very bullish on business growth. I'm very bullish on people taking effort and energy into growing their practice because it leads to, and it can lead to freedom, autonomy, and control. Down the road, 5, 10 years from now, building, having invested in a career and looking back and having that feeling of freedom, autonomy, and control is a very powerful seat. And so I'm very bullish on working with people on business growth because it ultimately gives them what I feel like is a real hold on their career and a real hold on their success and their outcomes. I'm happy to share all the secrets, Greg, but any thoughts about what I've said so far?
No, I'm waiting to hear what you're going to say next.
We have an incredible business development program. And so this isn't just a plug. It's really just to say that I've now worked with hundreds of lawyers on business growth. We've taken people over a series of years from 250,000 originations. I worked with one client. We went from 250K to 10 million in 7 years, 250K to 2 million in 2 years, 0 to 700,000 in a year and a half. Recently, we took a client from 500,000 to 20 million in 2 years. And so I have all the stories, and across identity, across demographic, across age, across time in the practice, I feel really excited and bullish on growing people's practices. We start with understanding ourselves, understanding the individual, because ultimately what you are selling is you are selling yourself. If I was going to pick up my iPhone and show it to you and say, hey, this thing is phenomenal. It's got incredible tensile strength. It's got an incredible processor speed. And every time I pull up the Safari or Chrome, the images and the videos pop up really quickly. You're talking about something that you're energized about, excited about. It makes someone else want to say, hey, I'm interested in that. A lot of people aren't comfortable talking about themselves. They're not comfortable articulating their own value. And so first, it's just understanding the value of your services. Oftentimes in the legal practice, we feel commoditized. We see other people that are more senior than us and we don't feel like we're up to snuff. And it's just so far from the truth. By the time you're ready for business development, I just talked to a third-year associate today that was fired about BD. I tend to think years 6, 7, and 8, and anywhere beyond, all the way up to 15 or 20 are the prime years. And what you want to first start with is understanding why you're amazing, because you actually have incredible legal skills that you can offer to others. I then get very clear with people on their goals, where they want to be, and what their ideal practice is. Because for me, once you clarify a goal, it's like Apple Maps or Google Maps. You clarify the goal, and now you can find out the path on how to get there. And there might be a few. On some of them, you pay tolls. On the other one, you take the highway. But there's a path to get to where you want to go. And we work with people in earnest on how to move them towards that goal. There's often two major ways. It's through building one-on-one relationships and getting exposure in scenarios that are one-to-many. So one-to-one and one-to-many. On the one-to-one side, you want to identify who your ideal clients are, who you need to build relationships with, and over time, create a strategy and a plan to nurture relationships with people. And in the one-to-many side, it's exposure. It's making sure that it's not just individuals, but many people hear about you so that over time, you can convert those people into relationships that ultimately become clients that you work with. For me personally, I feel very comfortable with working with people over a year, 2 years, and 3 years and getting them to their dream practice. And I've done this now so many times that there's not a type of person, a demographic, or a practice that we haven't helped build a business and build a practice. And so I'm very bullish on people taking intentional time to create their plan and strategy and effectively move forward to grow a meaningful practice.
Can you tell us about a time in a coaching relationship that you really struggled with and what made it difficult and how you broke through, if you did?
There are clients that are coachable and clients that are not coachable.
Right.
You think about it with players, you think about it with teams. There's just some coachable folks and there aren't. There are some team members that are willing and there's some team members that are less willing. And it's really up to each coach and client relationship of each individual. There's nothing wrong with it, by the way. There's no judgment there. It's just some folks are more coachable by certain individuals and others are less so. Some players shine with certain coaches and If they change teams and it doesn't work out or it does work out. And so I know that when I face a challenge or a client has a challenge that doesn't feel like we can address it, there's either something blocking them or there's something blocking me. And it's completely fine. And our job as coaches is to make sure that we work through their blockages, that we really unearth and try to understand what the blockage is, what's the situation or scenario that's getting in the way, and try to help them move it out of the way. What I love are the stories when they tend to work out, when we actually address that difficulty, when we get underneath it in a meaningful way, we identify what the challenge is, we really kind of find the root cause, and we let the process unfold with a plan that allows them to overcome and move forward with a new option, a new opportunity, new possibility, a new direction. And so we've had a lot of successful stories and breakthroughs and people going through challenges. And that's really what I love about this practice.
And how do you approach a relationship where you think the coaching isn't working out? Do you expressly tell them that? Do you refer them to a new coach? How do you approach that?
I haven't had a lot that haven't worked out. And so it's not
Okay.
luckily not a practice that I've had to get used to. We have a team of coaches. And so certainly if something doesn't work out with one coach, you can certainly work with another. With the people that I coach, at some point, there's sort of a natural point at which the growth has steadied or progressed to a point where it's time to wind down. And it typically happens anywhere between after 6 months to a few years. And at some point, people realize, hey, I've been through my growth. I'm at a place where I'm happy, or it's time to transition. And that works out perfectly mutually. And so you kind of have a sense that they've hit their growth opportunity and that they're ready to transition. And you can certainly name, I name and articulate it regularly if I feel like that's the case. And I also name that, hey, I let folks know, hey, I feel like there's a lot of growth ahead of us. And if they agree, then we keep going.
And do you coach almost exclusively lawyers or all sorts of professionals?
All sorts of professionals. We work with high performing individuals. We certainly work with a lot of lawyers because of my background and the background of some of the folks on our team. But we have a bench of coaches that all come from high performing professional backgrounds. And so we help people in leadership or people that are on the leadership track or path or people that almost self-identify as high performing. We help folks across the board.
And so what makes lawyers special, or are they just like everyone else when you approach them as a coach?
Lawyers are special.
Yeah, lawyers are special, right?
Lawyers
Why
are
are they so special? Tell
We're,
me about that.
we're special. We're special. The first thing that I love about lawyers is that by and large, especially the folks that we work with, they tend to be at least 10, 15, 20 years into the practice. By and large, most of the things they put their mind to, they've accomplished. If they haven't achieved at business development or getting to the partnership or moving their career to the next level, it's probably because they didn't give it the college try. They were busy serving other needs. And so what I love about lawyers is typically, by and large, most of the people that we work with, the lawyers that we work with, what they put their mind to many years ago, they've actually accomplished. So you're working with coachable people, individuals that once you give them a clear path, they're ready to break through that hole. You open up the hole in the line and they're ready to run downhill. They're also critical thinkers. They're high achievers. When you give lawyers the right map, they're strategic thinkers and they accomplish, again, what they put their mind to. And so I tend to find in this industry a really large group of people that are very coachable and able to move towards success. The challenges that we face are that we're critical thinkers, that we are issue spotters, that we identify what's hard and wrong about a situation. And oftentimes that gets in our own way. It's amazing for the work product. It's amazing for the contract or the case. It really gets in the way when we view ourselves with that lens. When we see ourselves with a lens and we start identifying what's wrong with us, I think that gets to be the hard part. And a lot of us suffer from those challenges, imposter syndromes, self-doubt, whatever it might be. And to be in the coaching position where we get to clarify that for people, open it up, unlock it, challenge it, and again, then offer a clear plan towards path to success. It's an exciting engagement.
I want to ask you, how have your mindfulness practices and your yoga practice affected your professional practice and the way you approach your career?
Mindfulness practices are underneath all the work that we do. We tend to blend the spinach in with the shake. We may deliver a workshop on how to give feedback, how to become an incredible leader, how to grow your practice. But ultimately, our mindset and how we approach a challenge and how we approach people and how we approach difficulty are really underneath it all. So for me, mindfulness and yoga practices are the most important thing for me personally. And then for our clients, these tools, by the way, we're not making any of our clients do yoga on our calls. So that's not what we're doing. But if you've ever been to a yoga class, what you realize that it's ultimately a practice in how we engage with difficulty and how we breathe through difficulty. You get into an eagle pose where your hands are crossed and your legs are crossed and you're standing on one leg. And then they say, breathe and smile. And you almost laugh to yourself like, this is impossible. But if you're able to do that in a conference room, if you're able to do it in a boardroom, if you're able to do it, I've been on the receiving end and been a witness in many depositions in my role in-house. It's a really hard thing to be in, a situation to be in when the light's on or in a room full of executives having to deliver a message. All of these are hard places to be. And what I remember in these complex situations is to breathe. I remember to have a positive outlook and to have the right mindset. And it really goes a long way. And so I find that mindfulness practice is a key to mindset change. And mindset change is a really key to growth. And that's what people come to us for, is growth and transformation. And so when we work with them, and underneath our work are these valuable principles on remembering to breathe, remembering to have a healthy relationship with difficulty, remembering to shift our relationship with difficulty and evolve it over time, it is a real key to unlock potential and growth in the future.
Spinning on the similar topic, I want to talk about emotional self regulation. We like to ask our guests how they manage emotions like fear, inadequacy, and anger at work. How do you manage those types of negative emotions? And how do you counsel your clients when they're struggling with those emotional self regulations?
Yeah, I want to start by saying I don't find them first to be negative emotions. I find them to be emotions that we experience in life. And life is an experience. If we're choosing life, then we choose to have positive moments and challenging moments. And then we have to decide on how we're approaching them. So facing a challenging moment, facing fear, facing anxiety, facing nervousness or stress, I like to check in on what that means. How does anxiety and stress show up in the body? How do you know that you're under stress? For anyone listening right now, how do you know that you're under stress? What do you notice? Checking in with your breath, checking with your body. A lot of times we spend a whole day without actually noticing that we breathe. And so just noticing right now and taking a moment. And oftentimes people say it, I feel it in my whole body. I feel it in my arms. I feel it in my chest. I feel a tightness. I feel it in my belly. My body temperature gets warm. And that's where the emotional intelligence begins, is actually just understanding ourselves as we experience difficulty. What happens to us? How does it affect how we respond? How does it affect how we react? How does it change how we engage in a situation? If you're stressed and you're checking email versus if you're breathing and open and you're checking email, how might that impact my response and what I write? And so the first key to this emotional self-regulation is an emotional self-awareness. It's just understanding ourselves. What's the stimulus and what's my response? What happens to my body? What happens to my thoughts? What happens to my mind? And that initial step is a really powerful first step or process or part of the process that allows us to then ultimately shift in how we respond, react, and then ultimately get impacted by the difficulties around us. What's coming up for you as I say this, Greg? What's your thought process?
My thought process is, even talking about it or hearing you talk about it is making me a little anxious and sort of raising my blood pressure because I'm thinking about how it impacts me and how I need to think about how I work through it as well. Is that strange? Is it sort of the opposite reaction?
Well, I'm curious, when you say it makes you anxious, what do you notice? Where does anxiousness show up in the body? So just to kind of play out this situation, how does that show up for you? What do you notice?
I'm feeling it in my upper chest and my breathing.
Yeah.
as
And
you were describing like the ways that it affects the body.
so now you're aware of the body. What happens to your breath? What do you notice about the breath when you're nervous? What happens to the breath?
It's quickening. And like you said, when you started to say you're not aware of it, it made me think, oh, now I'm aware of it.
Now I'm aware. Now aware. And so do me a favor, put your hand on your heart and your hand on your belly and just join me in taking 2 deep breaths. Just take a deep breath in, long breath out, and a second deep breath in and a long breath out. And what do you notice now?
More centered,
And so this is where
quieter.
quieter and centered, you said. And so this is where the value is. First, just becoming aware. Oh, my breath. I wasn't even paying attention to my breath all day. Oh, it's faster. Okay, what happens when it's faster? Body temperature gets warmer, muscles tighten up. Okay, what are the tools? Let me just take a breath and slow things down. So this is just one micro example. And engaging in this type of a practice, this self-awareness over time, ultimately allows you to then shift behavior and shift how we respond and react to situations.
Okay. I saw you took a 1-year sabbatical, which seems like a pretty unusual opportunity. Will you tell us how you approached that and how you made the most of that time?
Yeah, 15 years into the practice, I don't think I'd ever really taken a meaningful vacation. I don't know that I ever had a week off. And even when I did, I was working the whole time. And so towards the end of what was then the end of my legal career, I felt like I needed a month or 2 off. And I was telling my wife, and she said, "You don't need a month or 2 off, you need a year off." And I was laughing because I didn't know how that was possible. Apple didn't have a sabbatical program. And I was curious about how we would live a year without my pay. And my wife was really clear. She said, "I think it'd be amazing if you took time off. I feel like you deserve it. You've had an amazing career and you have a lot ahead of you. And taking time off is going to be really meaningful for you and your career. And so if we figured out the finances, would you take a year off?" And I was all in. And so she set it up and helped me go through the numbers and made me realize that this is actually possible for us financially. And after that, all roads led to taking my time off. And it was a significant turning point in my life and in my career. I took that time off, and it's what led me to go down this path. And without it, I would never have had the time to reflect and really think through what was possible. And if I'd only taken a month or 2 weeks off, as amazing as that is, I probably just would have wound down from work a little bit, watched some TV, maybe taken a vacation and wound right back up again. Taking that year off really allowed me to take time to breathe, to reflect, to understand, and then ultimately map out an incredible next chapter in my life and career.
Let me ask you about, since you're sort of I consider you sort of someone who's gathering a lot of information from your clients and you can sort of translate that to us. Are you hearing any trends in the kinds of feedback that your clients are getting from their supervisors, either in their formal evaluations or just informally, that are new or surprising or different in the past few years that you could share with us?
I think the trend is limited or no feedback that creates the greatest concern is that as a result of the pandemic and as a result of virtual work, that there is less contact, less connection, and less communication, and people end up relying on annual feedback rather than something that's more regular. A year ago, one trend that I noticed, which I talk about a lot, I got a call from a couple of pretty senior folks in different law firms, practice group leaders, firm chairs, heads of talent, people in just higher level positions. And they were telling me about, ironically, almost around the same time, there's this woman of color up for partner. There's this woman up for partner. There's this black male up for partner. And so noticing that the diversity of the candidates that people were talking to me about, and they all said, but there's some issues on their path to partnership. And they called me and they said, "Hey, here, we'd love to get your insight on this." And so I asked about the issues. There's some issues on politics. There's some issues in how people are being managed. There's some issues with client relationships. And I said, well, these are all significant issues. These are important on the path to partnership. Let's talk about how we can support the firm and support these individuals. And I asked, when was the last time they got feedback on these issues? And it was crickets. So I'm being told that here's somebody that's up for partner, right up against the moment they're being considered for partner. And for the years leading up, nobody was actually being clear and honest and giving direct feedback. To me, that's on leadership. That's on management. The bottleneck is at the top. And so what I encourage and invite is more meaningful feedback, more honest feedback, and more honest feedback regularly and year round. And the trend that I'm seeing is people having arm's length relationships, fearing that if I give this feedback, I'm going to lose this team member. They're not going to work with me anymore, feeling like the rumors will get around the office and they'll know who gave them the feedback, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of fears and concerns on the way. I'll face defensiveness and they won't actually receive it and it won't make a difference. And so a lot has to happen where we create a culture where people are both comfortable giving and receiving feedback. Around this time of year, I deliver many workshops at law firms on how we both give feedback effectively and how we receive feedback effectively, and also how we have the difficult conversations. And some firms invite us year over year to deliver these conversations annually because they're looking for a culture shift. And that culture shift is a better relationship between partners and associates, a better relationship amongst team members where there's more transparency, there's more investment in growth, and people are actually investing in their talent. And so what I want to see is more feedback, more thoughtful feedback as an investment in people's future, and creating a culture of connection and camaraderie, and this being a part of it rather than us hiding from this process.
How do you counsel your clients to use their own personal skill set to become their best leader and not sort of the stereotype of a leader at a firm?
The first place is very similar to what I was talking about with respect to business development. Path to improving as a leader is greater self-awareness. You have an incredible strength, and then you have some blind spots. What got you here won't get you there. It's a cliche. It's very meaningful. You leaned on certain strengths and skill sets to get you here, and then you unlocking your weaknesses will take you to the next level. That is completely authentic and focused on the individual. Some people are very strong, affirming, direct, clear, goal-oriented, and happy to move a team forward, but they may not be good with the people. Some people are people. They're really kind, connected, thoughtful, empathetic, understanding, but they may not be amazing at achieving the goals. And so we want to look at each individual. Everyone listening has leadership potential. It's a real hard look in the mirror and saying, hey, what am I amazing at? And what are the blind spots? And the leadership path is both strengthening what you're amazing at and then leaving a lot of room to improve on the blind spots.
Rudhir, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I'm so glad you spent some time with us, and your positivity really shines through everything, just like it says on your LinkedIn page. It's just great to speak with you as always.
Greg, it's great being here. Thank you so much for having me at City Bar events and for this podcast.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of This Lawyer's Life. Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar. If you enjoy this podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you listen. Find more City Bar podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, iHeart, or at our website at www.nycbar.org/podcasts. Be sure to check out Building Belonging, a podcast that embraces authentic conversations about DEIB solutions by amplifying the most marginalized voices in the legal industry and exploring spaces others dare not. This podcast was produced and edited by Eli Cohen.